Part 4. The Ripple Effect. 3 months after the Velthan sun was saved, a small delegation arrived at Earth's orbital station. They were Prith, an insectoid species with 4 arms and compound eyes that shimmered in multiple colors. Most humans found them unsettling to look at, but the delegation was received with full diplomatic courtesy. The Prith ambassador, whose name translated roughly as Clickweaver, stood before Earth's Strategic Council. His translated voice had a musical quality, notes layered over notes. 50 years ago, a Prith colony ship came to your space, Clickweaver began. We carried genetic samples of our plant species, the last survivors of a blight that destroyed our original homeworld. Other civilizations turned us away. They feared biological contamination. They called us refugees and told us to keep moving. Jiwan listened intently, already knowing where the story was going. She had reviewed the archives the moment the Prith requested this meeting. But humanity let us dock at your stations. Clickweaver continued. You gave us safe harbor for 3 months while we searched for a new home. Your scientists helped us analyze our plant samples, ensuring they were disease-free. You risked your own ecosystems for strangers. You asked for nothing in return. We remember, Jiwan said quietly. Clickweaver's compound eyes reflected the light in complex patterns. Now 50 years later, the blight has returned. A new strain, more aggressive. It spreads across our 14 colony worlds. Within 2 years, our crops will fail. Within 5, our people will starve. We have tried to solve this ourselves, but we cannot. He paused. We did not go to the Galactic Council. We came here first. Because we remember too. The response was immediate. Within a week, human agricultural specialists and xenobotanists were en route to Prith space. But Earth didn't just send scientists. They shared experimental terraforming data that had been carefully guarded, information that could be sold for enormous profit to dozens of species struggling with hostile environments. Why give this away? Minyo asked during a council meeting. This data represents decades of research. It's worth fortunes. The Prith sheltered our refugees when we had nowhere to go, Jiwan replied simply. That's worth more than money. News of the second major humanitarian mission spread quickly. Other species began searching their own records, looking for any past interactions with humanity. And they found them. Small favors, mostly forgotten. A merchant guild that had given humans favorable trade terms during the Reconstruction. A minor species that had provided shelter to human scientists fleeing the war. A medical cooperative that had shared vaccine research when Earth was struggling with a plague. In each case, humanity's response was the same. Overwhelming generosity, no strings attached. Trader Seojin moved through the independent rim worlds dealing in information and goods. He was good at his job, with contacts across dozens of species. Lately, though, he'd noticed something strange. People treated him differently, not with fear or suspicion, but with something almost like reverence. Your people saved the Velthans, a Drothian merchant told him over drinks. That changes things. Makes people think differently about humans. How so? Seojin asked. The merchant leaned closer, his scales shifting colors. Used to be everyone played the same game. You do favors expecting favors back. You calculate every interaction making sure you come out ahead. But you humans, you don't play that game. You remember kindness and pay it back tenfold. That's only unprecedented. Seojin heard similar things in port after port. Species were reconsidering their relationships with Earth. Some were reaching out with offers of genuine friendship. Others were reviewing their own past actions, worried about any time they might have wronged humanity. People are scared, the information broker told him. Not scared of human weapons or military power. Scared of the day they need help and remember they were cruel to Earth. Because what if humans remember that too? Back in the council chambers, the political landscape was shifting dramatically. The Velthans, restored and grateful, had become Earth's most vocal supporters. They spoke passionately at every session, advocating for human proposals, sharing their technology freely with Earth as a gesture of ongoing friendship. But more than that, other species were changing their behavior. Votes that would have been automatic rejections now passed with surprising support. Trade agreements became more equitable. Territorial disputes were resolved in humanity's favor more often than statistical probability would suggest. Speaker Thorne watched all of this with growing alarm. The Krathos Collective had maintained power in the galaxy for centuries, through careful manipulation of debts, favors, and obligations. They understood how to leverage temporary assistance into permanent advantage. But humanity's approach was undermining the entire system. "They're destabilizing the galactic order," he told his advisors in a private meeting. "If other species start following humanity's example, the entire structure collapses. How do we stop them?" An advisor asked. Thorne considered this carefully. "We can't attack them militarily. The Velthans would defend them and others might too. We can't outbid their generosity. We need to discredit them, make them look naive and foolish, show the galaxy that their approach leads to ruin." The Krathos began a propaganda campaign. Their message was subtle but consistent. Humanity was reckless, operating on emotion rather than logic. They would bankrupt themselves trying to save everyone. Their economy would collapse and they'd drag their allies down with them. It was only a matter of time. Some species believed the propaganda. After all, the Krathos had been right about most things for centuries. But an increasing number of species looked at the evidence and reached different conclusions. The Velthans weren't bankrupted by accepting help. They were thriving, the Prith were recovering, and Earth itself, despite the enormous expenditures, seemed to be growing stronger, not weaker. Una worked in Earth's intelligence division, monitoring communications across the galaxy. Her job was to identify threats and opportunities. Reading between the lines of diplomatic messages and public statements, her latest report made for interesting reading. "Humanity's reputation is fundamentally changing," she wrote in her analysis. "We're no longer seen as newcomers or potential threats. We're becoming known as the species that keeps its word, honors its debts, and responds to kindness with generosity. This is creating a form of soft power that money and military force cannot buy." She included data to support her conclusion. Trade partnerships were increasing. Scientific collaborations were multiplying. Even species that had never interacted with Earth were reaching out, hoping to establish friendly relations while they had nothing to lose. The most interesting finding, Una's report concluded, is that species are changing their behavior toward each other, not just toward us. Acts of kindness between species are increasing. Exploitative contracts are decreasing. Some diplomats are explicitly citing the human example. "We're not just changing our position in the galaxy, we're changing the galaxy itself." Ji-Won read the report with satisfaction. This was exactly what Earth had hoped for, though they'd never said it explicitly. A galaxy built on cooperation and mutual aid would be one where humanity could thrive for millennia, surrounded by genuine allies rather than temporary friends of convenience. But the report also included a warning. "The Krathos Collective views us as a threat to their hegemony. They're actively working against us. We should expect escalation." The escalation came sooner than expected. A Krathos frontier colony was struck by a massive earthquake, the result of unusual tectonic activity. Thousands were dead, hundreds of thousands displaced. The colony's infrastructure was destroyed. The Krathos government assessed the situation with cold calculation. The colony was economically marginal, located on the frontier specifically because it had limited value. Evacuating the survivors would be expensive. Rebuilding would be even more expensive. The logical decision was clear: withdraw support, relocate the survivors who could afford transport, abandon the rest. The announcement triggered panic among the colonists. They sent desperate pleas to the Krathos government begging for help. The government's response was bureaucratic and final: insufficient economic justification for emergency aid. In desperation, a group of colonists sent a message directly to Earth. They didn't go through official channels. They simply broadcasted on open frequencies, hoping someone would hear. "Humans of Earth, we know you're listening. 60 years ago, Krathos medical personnel treated your wounded refugees. They saved approximately 400 human lives. Our government has abandoned us, but we remember what our ancestors did. We're asking you to remember too." The message reached Earth within hours. Ji-Won pulled up the archives immediately. The entry was there, detailed and verified. A Krathos medical station on a neutral world had indeed treated human refugees during the worst years of the war. The doctors had asked for no payment, knowing the refugees had nothing to give. Ji-Won called an emergency council meeting. The debate was fierce and emotional. Many argued that this was different from the Velthan or Prith situations. The Krathos government was actively hostile to Earth. They'd blocked human initiatives, spread propaganda against them, worked to undermine human influence at every turn. Part 3. The Shocking Reveal. The Velthan defense fleet held position, weapons armed but not firing. On the surface of their homeworld, billions of people watched the skies, confused and afraid. The human ships hung in space like silent promises waiting for a response. Elder Vosh was in his private quarters when the broadcast reached him. He was old now, even by Velthan standards, and he'd been preparing for death. But when he heard Daehyun's words, something changed in his silver eyes. He reached for his communication device with trembling hands. "Stand down," he ordered the defense fleet. "Let them approach. These are not invaders. These are friends." The human ships moved forward slowly, respectfully. They took up positions around the Velthan sun, and within hours, the work began. Engineer Taejian stood in the control center of the modified station Prometheus, watching dozens of displays showing different aspects of the dying star. His team worked around him, coordinating with ships positioned at precise points around the solar sphere. "Deploy the containment array," he ordered. Massive field generators activated, creating invisible barriers that wrapped around the star like a net. The fields were designed to contain and direct the star's energy, preventing the runaway reactions that would lead to supernova. On the planet below, Kyungmi walked through the capital city's central plaza. Veltans gathered in crowds, watching the giant screens that showed the human ships at work. Many were crying, their silver skin shimmering with emotion. "Why?" an old Velthan asked her, his voice breaking. "Why would your people do this?" Kyungmi smiled gently. "Because 30 years ago you didn't ask why either. You just helped." News of the operation spread across the galaxy within hours. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Species representatives demanded explanations, their voices overlapping in multiple languages. The chamber was chaos. Speaker Thorn of the Krathos Collective stood at his podium, his crystalline form reflecting the harsh lights. "I demand to know humanity's true intentions. No species commits resources on this scale without expecting something in return. What is Earth really planning?" Ambassador Heejin rose calmly. She waited for the noise to die down before speaking, her voice clear and steady. "Humanity's intention is simple. We are saving the Velthan civilization because they helped us when we needed it. That's all?" "Impossible," Thorn declared. "The cost of this operation equals Earth's entire military budget for a decade. No rational civilization would—" "Perhaps that's the problem," Heejin interrupted, her tone polite but firm. "You're trying to understand this through the lens of political calculation. But we're not calculating anything. We're repaying a debt. This concept may be foreign to some of you, but we call it gratitude." The chamber erupted again. Species representatives argued among themselves, trying to understand humanity's motives. Several offered to contribute to the project in exchange for influence over Velthan territory. A few suggested that Earth must be secretly extracting some valuable resource from the Velthan system. "We seek nothing from the Velthans except their continued existence," Heejin stated clearly. "Any species that wishes to contribute may do so freely, but there will be no political strings attached. This is not a negotiation. This is not a business transaction. This is simply what humanity does." She sat down, ignoring the continued chaos around her. The council session lasted for 6 hours but reached no conclusions. How could they? They had no framework for understanding what humanity was doing. In orbit around the Velthan sun, the work continued day and night. Human crews worked in rotating shifts, some sleeping while others monitored the delicate process of stabilizing a dying star. It was dangerous work. The magnetic fields were unpredictable. The solar flares could destroy a ship in seconds if the shields failed. During the second month, disaster nearly struck. A massive coronal ejection erupted from the star's surface, larger than any the models had predicted. The wave of superheated plasma slammed into the research vessel Discovery, overwhelming its shields. Taijin watched in horror as the ship tumbled through space, hull breached, systems failing. "Launch rescue pods! Get them out of there!" 3 other human ships raced to intercept, their own shields straining against the radiation. They managed to evacuate most of the Discovery's crew, but 7 people died in the incident, and 15 more were seriously injured. The Velthan government offered to suspend the operation, horrified that humans were dying to save them. Elder Vosh himself made the journey to the Prometheus station, his frail body struggling with the trip. "You've done enough," he told Taijin, his voice heavy with grief. "You've tried. No one can ask for more than this. Please stop before more of your people die. Tejan looked at the old Velthon, at the genuine anguish in his expression. Then he shook his head slowly. With respect, Elder, we don't stop. Those 7 people died doing exactly what they would have wanted. They were saving lives. 2 billion lives. That math is simple, but the cost to your species is worth paying, Tejan said firmly. We made a decision and we stand by it. Your people saved 17 humans when it was dangerous. Now we're saving 2 billion Velthons when it's dangerous. That's how debts work. That's how honor works. The operation continued. Human engineers made adjustments based on what they'd learned from the near disaster. New safety protocols were implemented. The containment fields were reinforced. Back on Earth, public opinion was divided. Some people questioned whether the sacrifice was worth it. Others argued that humanity had its own problems to solve. But the majority supported the operation, understanding on a fundamental level what it represented. Humanity had nearly gone extinct once. They remembered what it felt like to need help desperately. They remembered who had helped them, and they honored those memories. 5 months into the operation, the exotic matter injection phase began. This was the most critical part of the process. Massive quantities of carefully prepared material had to be inserted directly into the star's core, rebalancing the fusion reactions, stabilizing the nuclear processes that had begun to spiral out of control. The ships moved closer to the sun than any vessel had ever dared, shields glowing white-hot from the radiation. Tejan coordinated from the Prometheus, his voice calm despite the enormous pressure. Injection vessels. Confirm position. Vessel 1, position confirmed. Vessel 2, position confirmed. Vessel 3, position confirmed. Begin injection sequence on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. The exotic matter streams fired simultaneously, piercing through the star's outer layers, driving deep into the roiling core. The star's output fluctuated wildly. For a terrifying moment, it seemed like the entire plan might fail, like the star would explode despite everything they'd done. Then slowly, the readings began to stabilize. The fusion reactions found a new balance. The magnetic field smoothed out. The star's output became steady, predictable, safe. Tejan watched the displays, barely daring to breathe. When the final confirmation came through, when every reading showed green, when the models projected stability for the next billion years, he felt his knees go weak. We did it, someone whispered. The Prometheus erupted in cheers. Throughout the human fleet, crews celebrated, hugging each other, crying with relief and exhaustion. They had saved a star. They had saved a world. On the Velthan homeworld, people flooded into the streets looking up at their sun. It looked the same to them, but the readings from their own observatories confirmed what the humans had done. Their star was stable. Their world was safe. Their children would have futures. Elder Vosh stood in his garden looking up at the sky. He was crying openly now, tears running down his silver skin. He had lived for over 300 years, had seen wonders and horrors beyond counting, but he had never seen anything like this. The Galactic Council convened again, this time not in chaos but in stunned silence. The reports were clear. Humanity had successfully stabilized the Velthan sun. The operation had cost them enormous resources, had claimed 7 lives, had pushed their technology to its absolute limits, and they had asked for nothing in return. Ambassador Hyejin stood to make a brief statement. The operation is complete. The Velthan star will burn steadily for another billion years. As a gift to the Velthan people, Earth is transferring full ownership of all stabilization equipment to their government, along with the technical knowledge to maintain the system themselves. We're also leaving a small team of advisors, but only if the Velthan government wishes it. Speaker Thorne rose slowly. I don't understand. You're giving them the technology? The equipment worth trillions of credits? For nothing? Hyejin looked at him calmly. We came to save lives, not to create dependencies or claim territory. The Velthans helped us once, asking for nothing. We've helped them in return, asking for nothing. The debt is repaid. What else would we do? The silence that followed was profound. Species representatives looked at each other, trying to process what they'd witnessed. Some began to wonder, what did this mean for the galaxy? What did it mean that a species would commit such resources, take such risks for no apparent gain except honoring a debt? And more importantly, what other debts did humanity remember? What other favors had been given to Earth during its struggling years? What would humanity do next? The galaxy was about to find out. Part 2. The Calculation. Begins. Commander Borum stood on the bridge of the stealth ship Whisper, watching her crew work in practiced silence. They had crossed into Velthan space 3 days ago, and so far no one had detected them. Human stealth technology was good, perhaps the best in the galaxy, though few other species knew it. Earth had learned to hide during the war years, and those lessons had never been forgotten. Approaching the target system, her navigator reported quietly. The Velthan home system appeared on their displays. 1 yellow sun, 7 planets, the third one supporting billions of lives. It looked peaceful from a distance, but the sensor readings told a different story. Begin deep scans, Borum ordered. I want everything. Solar output, magnetic field fluctuations, core temperature estimates. Compare it all to the Velthan public data. The ship's advanced sensors went to work, reading the star in ways that few civilizations could match. Humanity had poured enormous resources into scientific research during their rebuilding period. When you'd almost destroyed your own world, you learned to pay attention to how planets and stars actually worked. The results came in slowly, each reading worse than the last. The star's core was unstable. Fusion reactions were becoming erratic. The magnetic field showed dangerous fluctuations. Borum felt her stomach sink as she read the final analysis. 5 years, the science officer said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe less. This star is going to go supernova. Borum thought about the 2 billion Velthans living on the third planet, unaware that their sun was dying faster than anyone had predicted. Send everything to Earth. Priority Alpha encryption. The data packet was transmitted in a burst lasting less than a second, encoded in a way that would look like cosmic background radiation to anyone intercepting it. Then the whisper turned silently and began the long journey home. Back on Earth, in a secure facility beneath the rebuilt city of Geneva, Jiwan read the reports with growing concern. She was the head of Earth's Strategic Council, responsible for decisions that affected humanity's future. The office came with enormous pressure, but also enormous responsibility. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city that had been destroyed and rebuilt. Geneva had been one of the first cities reconstructed after the war, a symbol of humanity's determination to survive. Now it was beautiful again, full of people who had never known the desperate years. Jiwan activated the secure communication system. Assemble the committee. Emergency session. Authorization code Jiwan Alpha 7. Within 3 hours, Earth's top scientists, military leaders, and policy experts gathered in the council chamber. Holographic displays showed the data from Velthan space. Astrophysicist Minho presented the findings, his voice steady despite the grim news. The Velthan sun will explode within 5 years. Their own scientists estimate 50 years, but they're working with outdated models. They don't have the sensor technology to detect what we've found. Minho pulled up a simulation showing the supernova's blast radius. When it goes, everything in the system will be destroyed. No time for evacuation. No warning. 2 billion lives will simply end. Can it be stopped? Jiwan asked. Minho hesitated. Theoretically, yes. We'd need to stabilize the core fusion reactions, regulate the magnetic field, possibly inject exotic matter to balance the stellar dynamics. It would be the largest engineering project in recorded history. Show me the proposals. 3 plans appeared on the displays. The first was minimal intervention, buying the Velthans maybe 10 more years. The second was moderate, fully stabilizing the star but requiring massive resources. The third was comprehensive, not just saving the star but upgrading it, giving the Velthans a sun that would burn steady for another billion years. The room erupted in debate. Admiral Taywin spoke first. We can't afford this. Earth's economy is still recovering. We have our own colonies to support, our own infrastructure to build. This could set us back decades. The Velthans have nothing we need, another voice added. They're a declining civilization. What do we gain from saving them? 1 council vote, someone said. That's what they gave us, 1 vote. And now we're supposed to bankrupt ourselves? Jiwan listened to it all, her face expressionless. She had expected this reaction. It was logical, practical, the kind of thinking that had helped humanity survive when survival was all that mattered. When the arguments died down, she spoke quietly. Open archive entry VH2515. The display changed, showing a simple text record. The date was 30 years old. It documented the rescue of 17 Velthan crew members by the human medical ship Mercy. 3 humans injured. Captain Yejin risked her life and her ship to pull strangers from a dying star. Captain Yejin wrote in her log that she hoped someone would help humanity the same way someday, Ji-won said. The Velthans remembered. When we needed a voice in the council, Elder Vosh stood up. He could have stayed silent. He could have abstained. But he remembered 17 lives saved 3 decades ago, and he spoke for us. 1 vote, Admiral Taewon repeated. Ji-won turned to face him directly. 1 vote when we had almost nothing. 1 voice when everyone else was calling us dangerous. The Velthans helped us when it mattered most, and they asked for nothing in return. She looked around the room. We don't calculate the worth of a debt. We don't measure kindness on a scale and decide if it's worth repaying. We remember who stood with us and we honor that memory. But the cost, someone began. The cost is irrelevant, Ji-won interrupted. If we start calculating the value of debts, deciding which ones are worth repaying and which ones aren't, then we become exactly what the other species think we are. We become just another civilization playing the same old games. She tapped the display showing the Velthan sun. We have the ability to save 2 billion lives. We have a debt to the species that helped us. The choice is simple, Minho spoke up. If we're doing this, I recommend the comprehensive plan. If we're going to spend the resources anyway, we might as well do it right. Give them a star that will last. More debate followed, but the tone had changed. They discussed logistics now, not whether, but how. Plans were drawn up. Resources were allocated. Scientists volunteered immediately when they learned about the project. At the end of the 12-hour session, the vote was unanimous. Earth would save the Velthan homeworld. One more thing, Ji-won said as people prepared to leave. This stays secret until our ships arrive. We don't announce it to the council. We don't ask for permission or approval. We just do it. Why the secrecy? Admiral Taewon asked. Ji-won smiled slightly. Because if we announce it first, other species will try to take credit or demand concessions from the Velthans or turn it into a political circus. The Velthans helped us quietly without fanfare. We'll help them the same way. Over the following months, ships were prepared in secret. Equipment was manufactured and tested. Scientists ran simulations and trained for every possible scenario. The project was enormous, requiring resources from every human colony and the cooperation of thousands of people. Captain Sunmi's research vessel was recalled and refitted as the project's mobile command center. Engineer Taejin, who had helped rebuild Earth's power infrastructure after the war, signed on to lead the technical teams. Xenoanthropologist Kyungmi volunteered to work with Velthan civilians, preparing them for what was coming. In the council chambers, Hyejin attended sessions as usual, listening to debates and casting votes. Other ambassadors tried to learn what humanity was planning, curious about the unusual ship movements and resource allocations. She told them nothing, just smiled and changed the subject. 3 months after the decision was made, a fleet of 37 human ships assembled at a staging point just outside Velthan space. They carried enough equipment to reshape a star, enough supplies to support the operation for years if necessary, and enough determination to see it through no matter the cost. Borum's stealth ship Whisper scouted ahead, confirming that the stellar decay was proceeding as predicted. They had maybe 4.5 years now. Time was running short. The fleet jumped into Velthan space without warning. Alarms immediately went off across the Velthan defense network. Ships that had been drifting in peaceful patrol suddenly scrambled to intercept what looked like an invasion force. On the flagship Unity, Daehyun prepared to broadcast a message that would change everything. He thought about Elder Vosh, about Captain Yejin, about the archives entry that had started this entire chain of events. Open all channels, he told the communications officer. Broadcast to every Velthan receiver, every station, every ship. I want everyone to hear this. The channel opened. Daehyun took a breath and spoke the words he'd been practicing for weeks. People of Velta, this is Daehyun of Earth. 30 years ago, you saved 17 of ours when you had no obligation to do so. Today, we have come to save 2 billion of yours. Your star is dying faster than your scientists know. We are here to fix it. We ask for nothing in return. This is what it means when humanity says we remember. Part 1. The debt recorded. The council chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in circular tiers that reached toward a domed ceiling showing the stars beyond. Representatives from 43 different species filled the space. their voices creating a constant hum of translated speech. Daehyun sat in the human section, a small cluster of seats that still felt too new, too clean compared to the worn benches of the older civilizations. He watched as Earth's petition appeared on the central display. Humanity wanted expanded mining rights in the Outer Rim, territories that had been ignored for centuries but now held valuable resources. It seemed simple enough. Humanity had followed every rule, filed every form, waited the required 6 months for review. Ambassador Yejin stood to present their case. She was young for a diplomat, barely 30, but she spoke with clear confidence. She explained how Earth had recovered from the war, how their population was growing again, how they needed these resources to build a stable future. Her words were measured and professional. The response came quickly. A tall crystalline being from the Krathos Collective rose to speak. His translated voice echoed through the chamber. Humanity expands too fast. They rebuild their military while claiming peaceful intentions. They cannot be trusted with more territory. Another voice joined in, then another. Species that humanity had barely interacted with suddenly had strong opinions. They called humans aggressive, short-sighted, dangerous. They pointed to Earth's history of wars, the damage humanity had done to their own planet before joining the galactic community. Daehyun felt his jaw tighten. Everything they said was technically true, but it ignored the context, ignored how much humanity had changed. He glanced at Hyejin and saw the frustration in her eyes, though her face remained neutral. The vote was called. Daehyun already knew the result. The established powers would block them, and the neutral parties would abstain rather than risk offending anyone important. It was how the council worked. New species had to earn their place slowly, carefully, without challenging the existing order. Then something unexpected happened. An old alien near the back of the chamber rose slowly to his feet. He was Velthan, a species Daehyun recognized from their distinctive silver skin and three-fingered hands. This one was clearly ancient, his movements deliberate and careful. The chamber quieted. When an elder spoke in the council, others listened. "I am Vosh," the Veltan said, his voice soft but clear. "I have served on this council for 217 of your standard years. I have watched species rise and fall. I have seen countless debates like this one." He paused, looking directly at the human section. "But I remember something that others have forgotten." The chamber was completely silent now. Even the translator devices seemed to hush. 30 years ago, a Velthan science vessel was caught near a collapsing star. Our engines failed. Our distress call went unanswered. We had no treaties, no alliances that would compel rescue. We had 17 crew members and perhaps 6 hours to live. Bosch's silver skin seemed to dim slightly. A human medical ship detected our signal. They had no obligation to help. My people had never even met humanity before that day, but they came anyway. Bosch turned to address the full council. The star's gravity was already pulling at their ship. Their captain risked everything to reach us. They evacuated all 17 crew members. 3 humans were injured during the rescue. 1 nearly died. They asked for nothing in return. When we offered payment, they refused. They simply said they hoped someone would do the same for them someday. The silence stretched. Daehyun felt something shift in the chamber's atmosphere. "I was one of those 17, Bosch continued. "I would not be here today without humanity's courage. My children would not exist. The research my team completed, work that has benefited dozens of species, would have died with us in that collapsing star." He looked around the chamber slowly. "We Velthans do not forget our debts. If humanity seeks to expand, to build a future, I will not stand against them. I vote in favor of their petition." Several neutral species shifted in their seats. Whispered conversations started in multiple languages. The political calculation was changing. If the Velthans, an ancient and respected civilization, supported humanity, perhaps there was more to consider. The vote was called again. This time 5 species changed their position. It wasn't enough for full approval, but humanity won partial rights to the Outer Rim territories. A compromise, but better than nothing. After the session ended, Daehyun found Vosh in one of the chamber's side corridors. The old Velthan was moving slowly, clearly tired from the effort of speaking. "Elder Vosh," Daehyun said, bowing slightly in the Velthan custom. "Thank you. We didn't expect anyone to speak for us." Vosh waved one hand in a gesture that translated to dismissal. "I simply told the truth." Your people saved my life. I repaid that debt today. We are even now, Daehyun smiled. We're grateful regardless. He watched Vosh walk away, then returned to the human quarters. The first thing he did was access the secure terminal in his office. He opened a database that few people knew existed, one that had been maintained since Earth's earliest days of space travel. It was called the Archives of Remembrance. The database was simple in design but comprehensive in scope. It recorded every significant interaction between humanity and other species, particularly acts of kindness, assistance, or friendship. Each entry included dates, details, and the names of everyone involved. The archives had been started by Earth's first generation of diplomats, people who remembered what it was like when humanity had nothing and needed help desperately. Daehyun created a new entry. He typed carefully, recording Vosh's testimony, the date of the original rescue, the names of the 17 Velthan crew members saved. He noted that Vosh considered the debt settled but added a comment of his own. The Velthans helped us when we needed it most. Remember this. The entry was saved, encrypted, and backed up to servers on Earth and 3 colony worlds. It joined thousands of other entries, some decades old, some dating back to humanity's first contact with alien life. Daehyun sat back in his chair thinking about Vosh's words. The old alien believed they were even now, that speaking in council balanced the scales of a rescue performed 30 years ago. But Daehyun knew something Vosh didn't. Humanity didn't think about debts that way. They didn't measure favors on a scale, trying to achieve perfect balance. His terminal chimed with an incoming message. It was from Captain Sunmi, commanding a research vessel 3 systems away. The message was brief but concerning. Her ship had detected unusual energy readings while passing through Velthan space. The readings suggested stellar instability, patterns that didn't match what Velthan scientists had predicted for their home star. Daehyun forwarded the data to Earth's Astrophysics Division with a priority flag. He had a feeling this information might be important. That night, as the station's artificial cycle dimmed to simulate evening, another message arrived. This one came directly from Earth, from the Strategic Council itself. It was encrypted with the highest security protocols, the kind used only for critical matters. Daehyun decoded it. The message contained only one line, but those few words made his heart race. The Velthans helped us once. Begin protocol reciprocity. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then looked up at the stars visible through his office window. Somewhere out there, the Velthan homeworld orbited its aging sun, unaware that humanity was about to show the galaxy something it had never seen before. Daehyun closed the terminal and began making preparations. Whatever came next, it would be bigger than a council vote or a political favor. Humanity was about to demonstrate what it really meant when they said they remembered. Part 5. The Galactic Shift. The human relief fleet arrived at the Krathos colony within 3 days. 15 ships carrying medical supplies, temporary shelters, food, water purification equipment, and enough personnel to coordinate a full planetary evacuation if necessary. The colonists watched the ships descend with disbelief. Many had expected demands, conditions, political strings attached. Instead, the humans simply began working. Medical teams set up treatment centers. Engineers assessed structural damage. Logistics coordinators organized food distribution. Captain Sunmi commanded the operation from the ground, walking through the devastated colony with her staff. Everywhere she went, Krathos colonists stared at her with expressions she couldn't quite read. Fear, maybe, or shame, or something else entirely. An elderly Krathos woman approached her, moving carefully through the rubble. She was crying, her crystalline face streaked with moisture. Why? The woman asked, her voice breaking. Our government abandoned us. Your people owe us nothing. We've been your enemies. Why are you here? Sunmi stopped walking and looked at the woman directly. 60 years ago, your people saved 400 of ours. We don't forget that kind of kindness. We don't ignore it because governments disagree. We help because it's right and because we remember. The woman collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Sunmi knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, saying nothing. Sometimes there were no words adequate for the moment. Over the following weeks, humanity evacuated 30,000 colonists who wanted to leave and helped another 100,000 rebuild their homes. They brought in industrial fabricators to reconstruct infrastructure. They shared seismic stabilization technology to prevent future disasters. They asked for nothing in return, The political impact was immediate and profound. Across Krathos space, colonies began questioning why their own government had abandoned them while enemy humans came to their aid. Protests erupted on a dozen worlds. Reform movements gained momentum. The Krathos people began demanding a new approach to governance, one based less on cold calculation and more on the welfare of citizens. Speaker Thorn faced a vote of no confidence in the council. His own species had turned against him, viewing his policies as morally bankrupt. He stood at his podium one final time, his crystalline form seeming smaller somehow, diminished. "I don't understand," he said, and for once there was no political calculation in his voice. "How does your species survive? How do you not collapse under the weight of all this generosity?" Ambassador Hyejin rose to respond. The chamber was silent, everyone waiting to hear her answer. "You think generosity is a weight," she said quietly. "We think it's an investment. Every species we help becomes a genuine friend, not a temporary ally. Every debt we repay builds trust that benefits us for generations. You see short-term costs, we see long-term gains. But the resources," Thorn began. "Come back tenfold," Hyejin interrupted. "The Velthans share their technology freely with us now. The Prith have opened exclusive trade routes. A dozen species prioritize partnerships with Earth over more powerful civilizations because they trust us. We're not losing resources. We're multiplying them through the power of genuine relationships." She paused, looking around the chamber. "But honestly, that's not why we do it. We do it because it's right. Because we remember what it was like to be desperate and alone. Because we believe a galaxy built on mutual aid is better than one built on exploitation. The practical benefits are real, but they were never the point." Thorn sat down slowly. He had no response. What could he say to a civilization that genuinely believed what it was saying and had the results to prove it? The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to discuss restructuring how galactic civilization operated. Dozens of species, inspired by humanity's example, proposed new frameworks for interspecies cooperation. The old system of calculated debts and leveraged favors began to crumble. Not every species joined the new paradigm. Some clung to the old ways, viewing humanity's approach as naive idealism that would eventually fail, but a critical mass shifted, enough to fundamentally change how the galaxy operated. Trade agreements became more equitable. Humanitarian aid increased across all species. Acts of genuine kindness given without expectation of return became more common. Some diplomats explicitly cited the human example when proposing new policies. Historians would later call it the reciprocity revolution, the moment when galactic civilization shifted from transactional relationships to genuine cooperation. 6 months after the Krathos evacuation, Elder Vosh requested a private meeting with Daehyun. The old Velthan had been given advanced medical treatment by human doctors, extending his life by decades. He looked healthier now, his silver skin bright, his movement stronger. They met in a garden on the Velthan homeworld, under a sun that would burn steadily for another 1 billion years. Vosh sat on a bench looking up at that sun with an expression of quiet wonder. "I need to understand something," Vosh said. "The cost of everything you've done, the Velthan rescue, the Prith aid, the Krathos evacuation, all of it. Your civilization has spent enormous resources on these operations. How do you justify it to your people?" Daehyun sat beside him. "We don't have to justify it much. Most humans understand instinctively, but there is something I can show you." He pulled up a holographic display showing the archives of remembrance. Vosh watched as entry after entry appeared, hundreds of them documenting every favor humanity had received over the decades. "This is how we remember," Daehyun explained. "But there's something else the archives track, something we don't talk about publicly." He switched the display to show a different set of data. For every favor we receive and repay, the database tracks the ripple effects. The Velthan rescue led to 17 new formal alliances and dozens of informal partnerships. The Prith aid opened trade routes worth trillions of credits. The Krathos evacuation prevented a civil war that would have destabilized an entire sector. Vosh studied the data carefully, so it was calculation all along. A long-term investment strategy disguised as morality. "No," Daehyun said firmly. "You're thinking about it backwards. We didn't calculate these outcomes before we acted. We acted because it was right, and the benefits followed naturally. That's the key difference." He gestured at the display. "We could have calculated everything, tried to maximize returns, demanded concessions. But then we'd just be playing the same game everyone else plays. Instead, we chose to trust that acting with genuine generosity would create a better galaxy for everyone, including us. And it worked, Vosh observed. It's working, Daehyun corrected. This isn't finished. Every day we make choices about who we help and how we help them. Every day we choose trust over suspicion, generosity over calculation. It's not always easy. Sometimes it costs us dearly. But over time, over generations, we're building something that will last. Vosh was quiet for a long moment, looking up at his saved son. When my people rescued your medical ship crew all those years ago, we had no idea what we were starting. One simple act of compassion and it changed the entire galaxy. That's the point, Daehyun said softly. You never know which act of kindness will matter most. You never know when showing compassion to strangers will save your whole civilization decades later. So we remember everything. We honor every debt. We treat every kindness as sacred. Because in an infinite game, the player who builds the most genuine relationships wins. An infinite game, Vosh repeated. I like that. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over a world that had been saved by the simple act of remembering. Years passed. Humanity continued its pattern of radical reciprocity, always paying debts, always helping those who had helped them. The galaxy continued to change, slowly at first, then with gathering momentum. New species entering galactic civilization found a very different environment than the one humanity had encountered. They found mentors willing to help without exploitation. They found trading partners who dealt fairly. They found a support system based on mutual aid rather than calculated advantage. And they learned about the archives of remembrance, the sacred database where humanity recorded every kindness received. They learned that helping humans, even in small ways, could lead to enormous returns decades later. Not because humans calculated value, but because they genuinely honored their debts. Some species tried to game the system, performing acts of kindness with the explicit goal of banking future favors. Humanity responded to these attempts with polite gratitude, but without the overwhelming generosity they showed to genuine compassion. They could tell the difference. They always could. A young human student named Jinha visited the archives on a school trip. She stood before the massive display showing thousands of entries, each one a story of kindness remembered and repaid. Why do we do this? She asked her teacher, a woman who had worked on the Velthan rescue mission decades earlier. Why do we remember so carefully? The teacher smiled. Because someone has to show the galaxy what's possible. Because kindness is not weakness. It's the most powerful force in the universe. And because humanity learned through our darkest times that the species that survives is not the strongest or the smartest, but the one that helps others survive alongside them.